Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to reflect on the fact that we are here today. Thanks, every one of you, the audience, the MC, the organizers, the speakers. It would have been absolutely impossible to do this without you. So thanks to you. You see, while I was, first of all, I have to say that we were really not planning to have a conference. And not planning things is a recurring theme in Effect and in the history of Effect. Or at least not planning things very well. What I've agreed on was coming to a small meetup to have a talk. And one thing led to another, and today we're here. So that's impressive. And while searching for a good way of closing the day, having checked all the talks that we were having today, I decided to not talk about code, but talk about a little bit of a story behind Effect and why I ended up building it. So this is called the Effect, the origin story. As I wasn't planning to have a conference, for sure I was not planning to build a library. In fact, what I was planning to do was building an amazing fintech company in London. And I was exploring technology solutions and how to solve hard problems. I was really in a phase that I like to call fuck around and find out. Everything looked really good. I was a second-time founder, so had accumulated a lot of errors, not to repeat. I was in London, great place to be. And again, everything looked great, maybe except us. You see, when that photo was taken, was the beginning of 2019, and we were in the middle of a huge migration. We had a prototype built around Kotlin and Kafka, which failed spectacularly in the worst possible way. Not going to explain the details of how, but we realized that we needed more reliability on our system and completely different technology stack. That point in time, I decided to try out Scala and Akka clustering, which was really the driver for my initial decision. And I was using bits of functional programming with cats. And I have to say we were very satisfied about this. Very satisfied to the point that we thought we could bring the MVP to production. And so when you start to bring something to production, especially in a highly regulated market, where I had criminal liability for screw-ups and dealing with customer money, you think about testing. Some of you have declared test-driven development, type-driven development. This was really MVP-driven development. And we got to this point where, okay, we had to test the software, and that's where I realized that really the missing piece for proper testing is dependency injection. If you figure out dependency injection in a nice way, you're going to have great tests. If you don't, you're going to have a nightmare. See? Unreliable systems. Untested. Eventually it's going to work. Yeah, I hope it doesn't happen more often. But. So dependency injection, there are various ways of doing it. That's not a new topic. The easiest one is argument passing, which means really you pass dependencies to functions manually. Doesn't get more complex than that. The drawback is kind of obviously noisy. The other two are very common in object-oriented programming. That's inversion of control and service locator patterns. They usually tend to be type unsafe. That depends on the implementation, but that's usually the case. Then you have compiler magic, and well, that is magic. So you don't really want to rely on magic, or at least I didn't like it. And then you had this weird name, tagless final, that it's perfect. But the only problem it has is that nobody really knows it. Obviously, as a very small team, innovators, what did we pick? What do you think? Well, obviously, we're using cuts and functional programming. Let's pick the hardest thing ever. And I have to say that the resulting code looked much better. We had a great test coverage, and everything was going great. We were flying first class to New York. Actually, that was a free upgrade. In fact, we had still substantial issues. You see, we had a backend team composed of 3 people. That was me, myself, and my person. We had an infrastructure cost which some of you think can be not really prohibitive. We were paying 5K of cloud costs every month, but that sort of adds up if you have 250K of budget to use in a full year, including developer salaries, including my own salary for the sake of it. So that was prohibitive for us. And the system was not yet in production at scale. So we would have expected that cost to 3x, 4x, 5x. The clustering algorithm, while very nice, was completely unsafe. And oh my God, did it crash. Overall, everything added up to very low developer velocity. Because while I was the only person capable of writing backend code at that point in time, we did have a few front-end engineers. And they were constantly requesting changes. They were constantly requesting new features. The business had to change. When you're young, when you're developing a new startup, velocity of change is really the factor that prevents you from dying. Or, if it's too low, makes you die. What we really needed was a radical change, a complete pivot and a new stack. I didn't have really much of a choice if I wanted to scale myself. My front-end developers only knew TypeScript. So I could only use TypeScript, really. And with TypeScript, I only had at my disposal a library called FPTS that they didn't know, but I could start progressively teaching them step by step how to use it, at least for the very basic data types. And we got to the point where the system was nice. And the only issue we really had was that we really have custom solutions for everything. FPTS was covering the 1% of what we needed. Everything else was a custom solution. And you really don't want to end up maintaining a huge infrastructure for when you also have to build an app. We had custom solutions for graceful shutdown, resource management, control concurrency, retries, and whatnot. But we were still satisfied with the result. Satisfied at the point that we decided to productionize it. So we get back to the initial question. How do we go about testing this? Well, the solution that we had available in Scala, which was tagless final, was not a solution in TypeScript. Was close to impossible to be made, and even if it would have been absolutely impossible to explain how to a set of front-end developers while also developing an app. And at that point is really when the discovery sort of happened. You see, at that point in time, there was a code rebel in Scala land, which was really telling everybody that they were wrong. By the way, Midjourney is amazing. That code rebel today gave a talk here, an amazing talk. It's there. It's John DeGo, and the talk that changed the way I see software and that led to the creation of Effect is called The Death of Final Tagless, and it was delivered in London in 2019. If you haven't seen that talk, go and watch it. Even if it's now old, Zio has changed, everyone has changed, the ideas are there. So I thought, how hard can this be? And you see, in software engineering, we really don't do those things because they are easy, but because we thought they would be easy. And I'm known to fly low. I even thought I could do better. Well, 6 months after my wife thought I was about to ask for divorce, or as she later described it, for me, COVID-19 did not happen. I was locked in my room for 6 months. I was quarantining already. Nothing changed in my life. This commit was the initial version of Matex Effect. This is the commit that John showed in his slide today. And it was the start of a new journey. I was extremely tired, hating myself, but I was really happy about the result. And I was really happy about the impact that this result led to our company. You see, from being the only developer who wrote code in the backend, I no longer had to write backend code. I could manage other people. They would be productive by themselves. And this is pretty much where the story of the mess up in building a fintech company ends. Because from here, things went well. This is really where the phases of realization started. I knew I had something, and I thought, let's tell John. If you see the days, I was rehearsing this talk, and we had a shock. That's exactly 4 years ago, to the date. That was February 22nd, and John answered, straight up, February 23rd. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And oh boy, did he do something. You see, a month after this tweet, John called me back and was like, Mike, want to do a workshop in TypeScript, teaching functional programming to people? Like, hell yeah, that sounds like a good thing to do. And that led to a cooperation that made Effect sustainable, the development of Effect sustainable for a good period of time. So thanks, John, thanks, Sandra, thanks to the Zyverge team for everything you've done. As time progressed, other people realized that Effect was something important. Namely, a person who this morning delivered a keynote. He has been mentioned in pretty much every single talk, so I think you know who I'm talking about. That's obviously Johannes, that with his poking device got me to the point of creating a community in Discord. See, at this point, I was still primarily developing for myself and for my own company. I wasn't really thinking in terms of building a huge ecosystem library. This was not planned after all. And the community ended up being something that I don't really have words to describe. The engagement that the community had from the very beginning, the people that joined, it's just undescribable. It's one of the best communities I've ever seen, and we almost made no effort to actually make the community. There was no pump, there was no marketing operation to have people join. It was just heads down, building software and onboarding contributors over contributors and amazing people over amazing people. So we kept building. and building and building and building. You see, here it was 2021. Another friend of mine described 2021 as the year that does not exist, because there was nothing going on except us continuously building and rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding. We were porting Zio, we were having different ideas, we were testing stuff in TypeScript, we were stretching the boundaries. And did we do some questionable choices? Well, you see, at some point I said, let's fork TypeScript. And we do have an amazing community of people who you would thought they would tell me, Mike, are you insane? No. No. They told me, what a great idea. By the way, Patrick, please stop using TS Plus in production. But we were really at the point where it was time to meet. And what better circumstance that a Zio conference in Malaga, in the seaside of Spain, with 30 plus degrees and an amazing weather. Maybe a bit lower than 30 degrees, who cares at the end of the day? But amazing weather, you can see us. And that's where we met for the first time with Maxwell and Johannes. And that's where we presented our amazing work. You see, there were 3 slides there. The first one was programming Scala. The second slide was programming TypeScript. The third slide was programming TS+. Because we had bad ideas, and not only we forked TypeScript, but we built the whole effect with the fork of TypeScript. Which meant that we had a bit of rewriting to do to make it approachable and to make it what it is today. But this point in time was really the time where I felt I had to go all in. I knew we had something, I knew it worked. I've tested in a company and it worked perfectly. I had feedback from many other people in the community, and this was the time where I thought I wanted to go all in. And I deeply enjoyed working in the open source. I deeply enjoyed mentoring people. I deeply enjoyed getting feedback on what I built. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this feeling, but when you build a library, you program something, and a completely unrelated person on the other side of the world publishes a package which is built on top of your library that enhances the ecosystem. It's kind of gratifying in a weird way. So that's when I dedicated myself full-time to Matex Digital, which is to date my R&D hub for major projects. And this was also the time when I decided to share what I had in mind with Maxwell and Johannes. Maxwell told me from the start, what a great idea. Johannes didn't really tell me, be careful. What he told me was more along the lines of, let's think about it, let's go slow, let's make sure we do it the right way, and let's not rush it. Both of advices were great. I had to change the be careful word, but I could not find a better way to describe it. So apologies, Johannes, if that was not 100% what you meant to say. But then, I mean, after discussing if to do it, if not to do it, and so on and so forth, we got together and purchased the Effect.website domain. This is the picture of us literally purchasing the domain. You could see that we were laughing as hell, because we were thinking about a way that you could remember the website of Effect. And if the website of Effect is Effect website, it's kind of easy to remember it. I mean, Johannes even paid that for a year. But this was really the start of a new phase. this was the start of a phase where we decided to make Effect more approachable. We started focusing on targeting every developer within TypeScript, which links really well to what John has described. Don't be in a silos. Speak to people. Try to make these as larger as possible, onboard more people, hear feedback even from people that you wouldn't really like to hear feedback from. A full rewrite after, again, we wrote that thing in TS+. Something happened, and something undescribable happened. You see, if I could convince many people that jargon is bad, that classical functional programming doesn't scale and doesn't work, I did not believe for a second that I was able to convince Giulio Canti, the author of FPTS. And in fact, I did not. He did it by himself. And at this point in time, see, it was February 2023, FPTS merged with Effect, making Effect the absolute default for functional programming in TypeScript, with a community that is no longer broken, that is no longer pointing in different directions, but that has decided that the way that we like functional programming in TypeScript is without jargon, is accessible to every developer, and should be as simple as possible. Not compromising on quality. Shortly after, we decided to incorporate Effectful Technologies, which is one of the companies that sponsored this conference today. After a lot of deliberation, if to do it or not, and with which partner, which is a very, very important choice, we secured funding. This was March 2023. And that meant we could hire. And we found the right people. And oh my God, did we find the right people? You see, we've hired Giulio Canti as a founding engineer. We hired Tim Smart as a founding engineer. A lot of people don't even realize that Tim and Giulio are hired, because their interaction with the community on a daily basis and their contributions did not change with hiring. They were already full-time by themselves, unpaid. It's simply amazing. Then we part-time hired Mirela for community management and Johannes as advisor, advocate, really to let him do whatever he wants and to use Effect as much as he wants, to give us feedback on a daily basis and to help us make Effect great. Effect grew a lot. We did not announce anything up until today. And the adoption of Effect really went up. And this is thanks to the work that we did in making Effect more approachable. And I mean, today we even have a documentation, come on. We did not have that before. The community kept growing. New people kept joining. And new amazing people kept joining. You see, the team of organizers of this conference was not a member of the community a year ago, which is kind of amazing. I went a bit ahead of myself. We launched our documentation. The Effect API got better and better, or at least I think so. And as I said, amazing people kept joining. So this leads us to today. Today we have a conference. And I really want to take a moment to, again, thank specifically each one of the organizers. Because the amount of work that sits behind doing a conference is just insane. We did it because we thought it was easy. We've launched our new website, which tries to address the whys of Effect. What problems does Effect solve? We've received great feedback. Please keep giving us feedback. We want to improve this, and we want to make this as accessible and approachable as possible. We even launched a blog section to have people that are maybe not part of the community or are part of the community but can't follow everything on a daily basis to be updated on what goes on in Effect. And you see, we discussed different formats. We're, by the way, not sure we're going to publish a blog post every week. We are just trying stuff out. But our initial concern was maybe a week is too short. We don't have enough material every week. The blog posts are already far too long to be read, and there are mostly links to commits and descriptions of what happened in the ecosystem projects, which to me is mind-blowing. So this leads us to the future. Today we are announcing Effect 1.0. No. Don't get too excited. No. You see, we took over Effect, the NPM package, so it would be impossible to announce Effect 1.0. And by mistake, we launched Effect 2.0 a few months before. So I cannot announce Effect 1.0, I cannot announce Effect 2.0. What I can announce is that we will be releasing soon Effect 3.0 RC1 with a 1 month expected time of arrival to Effect 3.0. Please give feedback. It is now the time to give the most of the feedback, and really in this month, it's the month where we are allowing ourselves to still break something, but after that, API stability, no breaking changes, and progressive enhancements are going to be our driver. And this is because a production-grade system needs a stagnant or a stable core set of modules to be built on top. You don't want to change millions of lines of code, as John described today, in a far better than I could ever do. Our ecosystem projects kept growing. And some of those will land when stable in the official Effect package. For example, the next that will be incorporated is Effect schema. So as soon as we are sure that Effect schema is stable, we'll merge it inside Effect itself, so that errors from the core library will become serializable by default, and really type safety across the boundaries will be part of the default standard library of JavaScript. Maybe a bit too much. Now that Effect is stable or close to, what are we gonna do? We're gonna stop, or are we gonna keep pushing the boundaries? Stop. Don't do anything else. Take a break, take a holiday. Maybe we need one. Malaga would be a good place. No, of course, we will keep going. And us today, we've demonstrated through different talks, Team Smart with the latest and greatest, Mattia Manzati with durable workflows and effect clustering. There are other higher level problems that we want to solve. We really see Effect as the default standard library of JavaScript. And we want to bring to this system, to this ecosystem, anything that is great in other languages. As I described at the beginning, one of the reasons I picked Akka cluster was for the clustering mechanism. And fintech is a workflow-intensive domain. You have a lot of those transactions as the ones that Mattia described. We want you to be able to do that in TypeScript without leaving the environment that you love, probably. And all of that is not just a dream. It's currently in alpha, and you can start trying it today. We want to extend what we've shown. I have to mention David K for state machines and state charts. They are kind of a perfect fit for one of the things you could do in workflow execution. Workflow execution has two types of workflows. One describes a short transaction, a transaction that is supposed to happen on a few milliseconds in the happy path, and that may end up taking minutes or days if things fail, but very small and compact. For those, a code-first approach is great, because you're familiar with it. You can read code, you don't care about updating too much that code, you don't care about querying the state of that code, what could happen in 200 milliseconds that I want to know. Pretty much nothing, I just want to know the result and that everything went right. But there are other workflows that are long-running, where updating code becomes extremely important, where querying current state becomes extremely important. This is where state-first design can really make the difference. So we plan to try out a full-blown integration between XState and clustering. Don't know if it works, don't know if it doesn't, but that's the direction we are going. As a commercial entity behind open source, we know that we have to be careful, and we know that sometimes conflict can harm developers. See, what we release in the open source will remain open source, always. If we release something under MIT, it's gonna be preserved as MIT. If you're asking yourself, how are we planning to make money? That's a great question to ask. We're not kind of giving you the answer today, but it is in the direction of making services and products for Effect and built with Effect that enhance the ecosystem capabilities and that allows you to build production-grade TypeScript at scale. So thank you.